Chapter 1, Abandoned in the Rain. The rain tapped lightly against the window, a soft percussion that somehow mirrored the irregular rhythm of Lena's heartbeat. She lay curled up on the faded couch, a thin blanket wrapped around her shivering body. Her fever made everything feel distant and unreal, yet the ache in her chest, the hollow kind only betrayal can carve, was sharp and unyielding. Her phone vibrated on the coffee table. She barely had the energy to glance at it, but the glow of the screen drew her in. Messages from Ryan. Or, messages about Ryan. Beach today. Can't wait with you. The notification made her stomach twist. Not with excitement, but with a bitter, gnawing emptiness. Her boyfriend, the man who had whispered promises of forever into her ear, had left her alone, sick, feverish, in a small suburban apartment, just to accompany his first love to the shore. Lena felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She'd learned early on that crying without control only left her more vulnerable. Yet, the betrayal throbbed through her body like an invisible fever, hotter than the one already burning her cheeks. Her fingers trembled as she reached for a half-empty cup of lukewarm tea. The steam offered little comfort, but she sipped anyway, letting the bitter liquid coat her throat. She thought about Ryan, the way he used to smile at her, the way his hand would find hers without asking, the intimacy that had once felt like a warm blanket in a cold, unforgiving world. And now, he was gone. The room felt too large, too empty. The familiar hum of the refrigerator, the soft creaks of the apartment settling at night, even the distant sirens from the streets outside, all of it reminded her of one undeniable truth: she was alone. Her mind wandered back to the day they first met, a memory she had cherished before it turned bitter. Ryan had been charming, confident, everything she thought she wanted. He had promised to teach her independence, to help her find herself while staying by her side. And for a while, it worked. He had been patient, guiding, affectionate, but he had also been selfish. Lena wrapped the blanket tighter around her body and closed her eyes. The memory of his warmth, once comforting, now cut her like shards of glass. She could almost feel the ghost of his touch against her skin, a cruel reminder of the intimacy they had shared, now tarnished by betrayal. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes, time was meaningless in her fevered haze. She finally rose unsteadily from the couch, her bare feet cold against the floor. The apartment was silent except for the rain, which now drummed harder against the windows as if echoing her inner turmoil. She dragged herself to the kitchen, opening the cupboard for something to eat, anything that could restore a shred of energy. All she found were some crackers and a jar of peanut butter. The simplicity made her feel both helpless and oddly liberated. She spread a thick layer of peanut butter on the crackers, taking small bites. With each one, she reminded herself that she could survive this. She had to. Later, as the evening deepened into night, Lena sank onto the balcony, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. The city lights reflected in the rain-slicked streets below, distorted and flickering like fractured glass. She thought about Ryan again. He had spent 6 years teaching her independence, yet in the end, it seemed as though all of it had been for nothing. And then the anger came. A slow burn that chased away the coldness, replacing it with a fiery determination. "I don't need him." She whispered it aloud, letting the words hang in the damp night air. The rain fell harder, washing the apartment in streaks of silver, as if nature itself approved of her defiance. For the first time that day, Lena felt a flicker of control return. She would survive. She would thrive. And when she did, Ryan would realize what he had lost. The following days were grueling. Her fever spiked, leaving her delirious and trembling. She spent hours in bed, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by half-empty mugs of tea and crumpled tissues. She forced herself to eat, to drink, to move, each small victory a declaration of independence. In the quiet moments, she began to dream of the life she wanted. A life where she didn't depend on Ryan's approval or affection. Where she could travel, laugh, and feel passion on her own terms. She pictured herself walking along sunlit streets in distant cities, hands warm with freedom, heart light with self-love. And yet, even in her solitude, desire remained. Not for Ryan, not exactly, but for someone who would cherish her wholly, for nights where intimacy was shared, not stolen. She allowed herself to imagine the softness of a touch, the electricity of a lingering kiss, the quiet vulnerability of a lover who would never abandon her in sickness or fear. That night, wrapped in her blanket on the couch, Lena made a promise to herself. She would not remain a shadow of what Ryan had known. She would become the fire he could never extinguish. The rain continued to fall, a lullaby for the broken and the brave. And Lena, alone yet unyielding, let herself finally rest, knowing that tomorrow she would rise, stronger, smarter, and ready to reclaim the love she deserved, whether Ryan returned or not. Chapter 2: The Lessons of Loneliness. The city had changed, and so had Lena. Gone were the quiet, feverish nights on a worn couch. Gone was the girl who trembled at the thought of abandonment. Over 6 years, she had rebuilt herself, piece by piece, discovering strengths she didn't know existed. Her mornings now began with sunlight spilling across her apartment, illuminating soft, clean sheets and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Lena had learned to cherish the small routines that anchored her, yoga stretches by the window, journaling her thoughts, and picking a new book each week to escape into worlds beyond her own. She worked at a small but thriving art studio, painting vivid, intimate portraits of strangers. Each brushstroke carried a piece of her soul, a catharsis that left her both exposed and empowered. Lena had discovered a unique pleasure in creation, a passion that filled the emptiness Ryan had once left behind. Despite the independence she had forged, loneliness still lingered like a faint scent in the air. She missed human connection, the kind that made her pulse quicken, the kind that left lingering warmth in its absence. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she allowed herself to imagine the intimacy of a hand brushing hers, a whispered laugh shared late at night, the electric tension of a kiss that lingered longer than it should. But these were fantasies she indulged cautiously, reminders that she could want without needing. One rainy evening, she found herself at a cozy little coffee shop tucked between towering buildings. The aroma of espresso mixed with the soft warmth of candlelight created an intimate haven from the storm outside. She chose a corner seat, letting her thoughts wander as she sketched in her notebook. Her pencil danced across the page, capturing the curve of a stranger's smile, the delicate tilt of a head. Small details of life she had learned to notice when she had nothing else to anchor her to the world. As she sketched, a barista brought her a cup of tea with a gentle smile. "You always seem to get lost in your art," he said softly. "It's nice to see someone so focused." Lena smiled, a flicker of warmth spreading through her chest. She realized that she was beginning to notice people in ways she hadn't before, not just for companionship, but for connection. She appreciated the subtle brush of a hand, the quiet attentiveness in someone's eyes, the kind gestures that spoke volumes. Her friendships had deepened too. She had surrounded herself with people who valued her presence, who laughed at her jokes, who listened when her words stumbled over memories of pain. These connections, though platonic, had become her lifelines, teaching her that love came in many forms, and that she deserved all of them, without compromise. Yet, even in this newfound stability, desire simmered beneath the surface. Lena often lingered on the thought of intimacy, not for conquest or validation, but for the deep, unspoken thrill of being seen and cherished. She allowed herself the luxury of imagining gentle touches that sparked shivers, stolen kisses that left her breathless, nights where passion and tenderness merged into a perfect, consuming rhythm. One particular night, she walked along a quiet, rain-drenched street, the puddles reflecting the city lights in shards of color. The storm outside mirrored the storm within her, a mixture of longing and defiance, desire and self-possession. She smiled to herself, realizing that she no longer needed Ryan to define her happiness. The girl who once trembled in betrayal had become a woman who owned her desires, her heart, and her future. And yet, she wouldn't deny that part of her still remembered him. The way he had once traced the line of her jaw with a finger, the warmth of his embrace, the intimacy that had been theirs before betrayal. Those memories were no longer chains, they were sparks, reminders of both vulnerability and strength. By the time Lena returned to her apartment, soaked but exhilarated by the rain, she felt a profound sense of balance. She had learned that loneliness was not weakness, that desire was not shameful, and that independence did not preclude passion. She curled into her bed, the sheets cool against her skin, and allowed herself to imagine a future where intimacy and love existed on equal terms. Not the desperate, dependent love she had known with Ryan, but a love that was mutual, tender, and consuming, where vulnerability was met with respect, and desire was a language shared freely between two people. As she drifted into sleep, the rain outside softened, a lullaby for a woman who had learned to thrive in her own storm. Lena had grown, she had discovered herself, and the world, vast, unpredictable, and full of promise, was hers to navigate. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that one day, the path she had carved for herself would intersect with someone who could finally meet her fire without fear,